Welcome to the Improve Work podcast. I'm your host, Daniela Tancău, an HR consultant helping entrepreneurs and team leaders build motivated, high-performing teams. Here we talk about leadership, employee motivation, and other topics that enhance your ability to lead. Whether you are an entrepreneur with a team, a business owner planning to build one, or a leader in a company. You'll gain practical advice and insights from me and my guests, experts in the field and entrepreneurs who share their leadership experiences. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on every episode. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Improve Work podcast. Today's topic is Rethinking Leadership in a Changing World, and my guest is Kevin Eikenberry. Kevin is the Chief Potential Officer of the Kevin Eikenberry Group, a leadership and learning company based in Indianapolis, with a team spread across the United States. He has spent over 30 years helping organizations and leaders from at least 53 countries. Kevin is a leader, consultant, trainer, coach, and course creator. He is also an author of several best-selling leadership books. His latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence, was released this year, and we talk about it in this episode. Beyond that, Kevin is also a speaker and podcaster. His podcast, The Remarkable Leadership, has featured hundreds of guests over the years, so it's a great place to learn from real-world leadership experiences. In this episode, we talk about how team leadership has evolved over the years, about specific examples of how to lead team members, about creating a balance between work processes and a company's ability to stay flexible, about flexibility in leadership and navigating uncertainty. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin. I'm really looking for our conversation today about leadership.
Well, we had an earlier conversation to prepare for this, and so I got more excited ever since we had the chance to chat before, and I'm glad to be here.
Good. So we can start. So my first question is if you think that there have been changes in the skills a team leader is required to have in nowadays compared to, let's say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. The first thing I would say, and I've been saying this for years, is that most of leadership isn't changing. But what is changing matters a lot. And we need to make sure we're thinking about the parts that are changing, right? But it's important that we start by saying not everything that you know about leadership is changing, not everything's going away. Like, people have been leading others for thousands of years, and some of those things that worked then, building the pyramids, for example, work today. But your question is a good one, because the things that are different matter a lot. And obviously there have been some things people have needed to be learning and still need to be learning and practicing, or about how do I lead differently when I don't see my people every day. They're working remotely at a distance, they're halfway around the globe or whatever. But the other thing, and I think a big part of our conversation today, is that as the world gets more complex and more uncertain, we have to be willing to change some of our approaches to leadership, not the foundational principles of leadership, the what and the whys of leadership, but the how of leadership has to evolve. If we think about it this way, Daniela, you said 10 years ago, if you as a listener were a leader 10 years ago and you haven't changed how you lead since then, I will tell you that you are not as effective today as you were then, because the world is changing. However good you were, however effective you were then, if you're not changing and the world is changing around you, it's not conspiring to get closer to your approach. So it requires us, in a world that's changing, not to change everything, not to change the foundation of our house, but we have to be updating our approaches, because if we don't, we can't succeed in the future world.
And what are some elements that we need to that has changed along the way?
Well, certainly, we could stop right here with the world's view of work has changed because of a pandemic, right? So the way we thought about work, talked about work around the world 10 years ago was, well, we either work 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, and if we don't, we immediately describe that our model is different. There's not a single model anymore, right? There's different approaches. There's where we work, when we work, how we work, all of that's different. So everything about the where and when of work has changed. So that's certainly one thing. The continuing shift of technology is another. What's happening with AI and will be happening with AI is another. Certainly another one is that work is more interconnected, global, um, and just generally complex than it's been before. Any one of those three is a big enough reason for us to take note. But the fact that all three of those and more, geopolitical uncertainty, we go on, any of those by themselves are enough. When you put all of those together, it's a wake up call for us as leaders to become more aware of how we lead and how we can lead better, which I believe means leading flexibly.
Mhm. So these were some causes that force team leaders and business leaders to change their approach and how they lead their teams. Can you give some specific examples on how these external things impacted the leadership and what leaders should had to change because of this?
Yeah, I love that you're asking the question, not just about leaders in general, but team leaders, because I think a lot of times if we're a team leader or we're a frontline leader, we think, well, some of the stuff that Kevin's talking about is for the senior executives, and I think it's absolutely for everyone who's in a leadership role because we're all dealing with this uncertainty and complexity. So to me, one of the things that we have to do is we have to, number one, realize that the world is changing. And number two, be willing then to make adjustments ourselves. And I think this is the single biggest thing we need to implement. And that is the way that most of us think about the world is, well, it's either this or it's this. It's black or it's white. We're either about getting the outcomes or we're focused on the people. Like we're results driven or we're people focused. And I would suggest to you that that's a false description. That most of our work as leaders is not black and white. Most of our work as leaders is shades of gray, which means it's not this or this, but it's this and
And
this.
this.
So it's the and so it's thinking about results and relationships, to use that as an example, as two things that we need to always be addressing both.
Mhm.
And and so that requires us to realize that there's a tension between them, right? And that there's not a single right answer all the time. We grew up in school, 2 + 2, there's an answer, right? We can come up with all sorts of stuff that we learned in school, like there is an answer. In the workplace today, more so than ever, there's not a single answer. There's a bunch of possible answers. It's our job as a leaders to get comfortable with those possibilities and pick the approach in the moment that will help us get the best results, which might not be what we are used to, what we're comfortable with, or what we even like to do ourselves.
Mhm. We'll get in some specific examples later, but now I want to ask you,
Okay.
what do you think that are the main qualities and skills of a successful team leader from your perspective?
Yeah. Sure, there are plenty, and I'm going to start with, as I've just said, that I think number one is that we have to be willing to flex our approach. I think another really critical skill is the skill of learning, to be open to and continue to learn, which goes with that flexibility piece. I think beyond that, other core skills include our ability and to understand how change takes place so that we can lead and support and nurture and champion change better. Certainly, to be a highly effective team leader, we need to work on our communication skills, whether that's one-to-one, one-to-many, in person, over Zoom or Teams. Like we could, in writing, like we could lay all of those things out around communication. We certainly would put that in the list. I think that to be a highly effective team leader, we have to become an effective and comfortable in our role as a coach. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say, along with flexibility and learning, I would say that you have to consider change, coaching, and communication, as well as, I'll add one more C, and that is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Helping our teams to collaborate wherever they might be located, but also being a clear collaborator ourselves. As a team leader, it's important to realize that you're not just on the team that you lead, but you're on another team at least as a team member. And so being more effective in your ability to collaborate helps you not just when you are the boss, but in the other parts of your role as well.
Mm-hmm. I will address you a common question, and I'm curious about your answer. Do you think that a
Sure.
leader should be more experienced than the people he or she leads? So be more
Maybe,
competent.
maybe. I think there's a, you know, every organization that I've observed or worked with around the world does a similar thing. And that is they typically promote the person who's the best in the role to be the leader of the people doing that role. We take the best accountant and make them the finance leader. We take the best mechanic and make them the head of the maintenance team. We take the best salesperson and make them the new sales leader. And that's understandable, I suppose. And yet, and because we do that, because we frame technical competence as important in the progression, then that leads those leaders to over believe that their knowledge and competence is what's most important, which leads those same leaders to often lead less effectively because they are now saying, well, there's a right answer. There's the way I do it, and that's the way we should do it. Or they feel like they're supposed to have all the answers, and all of those things can get in the way when things are uncertain and complex. And so, um, you know, so back to your original question, should we promote people who are the most experienced? I would say we need to promote people who, number one, have interest in leading because it's a different set of skills. And
Right.
number two, are exhibiting some of those skills now. Like we are leaders, forget position for a second. We are leaders when people are following. If you look at the folks on your team, who are the thought leaders? Who are people looking to and following? Those are people that I want to know more about their interest and desire to lead. And that might, and I'm not saying we should promote someone 2 weeks after they start, but I am saying to immediately assume that we should do this based on seniority, um, I think we've proven over and over isn't always the best answer.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, and I think
Agree?
that yes, yes, totally. And I think that this depends from case to case, and it can be discussed every choices that we have to make.
I think it's so important. Here's the thing, when we're already a leader, we sort of think that others want to be a leader too. Or they want to, right? Like, well, I've got to this spot. I'm sure other people want to do that too. Not everybody does. Some people
Right.
don't want the responsibility. Some don't want to do the different kind of work that's required. Some don't want to do the continual learning that's necessary. And you know what? If they're technically successful, that's okay. That's why I started with number one. I want to know, are they interested? Do they have a desire to do this work? Because if they don't, and they're adding value where they are, at least today, or at least right now is not the time to promote them. Their view about that might change. But for now, to promote them when they just as soon still be a member of the team, it's just a mistake and no one wins. That person doesn't win, you don't win, and the team probably doesn't either.
Yes, I think that you have to see if that person is motivated to have a leadership position in the first place. Even that person has all the skills that he or she needs to have that role in the team.
Sometimes you see they have that potential or you see them exhibiting some of those things. Sometimes it's not just their desire, it's their confidence or their awareness. They don't see what you see. And so if
Yes.
they don't believe they can be successful, if their confidence level or their self-image doesn't support that shift, that's where we need to help them. That's where we need to coach them before we promote them.
Right. So let's go in some specific situation and let's see how the leadership skills go in place. So let's say you have two new members in your team, and
Okay.
one of them is a salesperson, and the other one is in an IT role, and
Okay.
you are their direct leader. What are the
Okay.
first things you would do during their first weeks at the company to learn the best ways to lead these two people?
Well, we're not going to figure it out without having conversations, right? And so obviously we spent time to hire them. And and often what I find is we spend so much time trying to pick the right person, and then we sort of take a deep breath, and now we've got them on board, and here we go. We don't spend enough time once they're on board to help them be successful. So I think that the most important thing that we need to do is to spend time, and this may not be physically spend time with them because we might be in different locations, but we need to be spending time with them in conversation and not doing all the talking, right? We need to find out what it is that where they're getting stuck, where their concerns are, what help they need, what they are looking for in a boss. So, like, we usually think about, and many leaders aren't very good at this, setting clear expectations about what success is. Like, a lot of leaders aren't very good at that at the end of the day. But usually, when we talk about expectations, we think about it as boss to team member, right? So in your first few weeks with both of your new people, your salesperson and your IT professional, you're probably doing some onboarding of some sort, and in that, you're probably hopefully talking about what is success for them, what are you looking for from them, and you think about expectations that direction. If we want to be more effective in leading them, coaching them, helping them be successful, we also need to know what their expectations are of us. What are they looking for in a leader? What kind of coaching is most effective or helpful for them? Uh, in what ways and what rhythm and cadence do we need in terms of how often we have one-on-ones and all those sorts of things? Hopefully, you have some of those things as your starting point, but you need to your natural approaches. But you need to understand what their needs are and their desires are so that you can help to adjust, flex your approach based on what their needs are. And it isn't just what they say up front, but what you can in that continuing conversation. Like, one of the things that I continue to ask members of my team, not just 2, 3, 4 months in, but 5, 6, 8, 10 years later, is I continue to ask, what can I do to help you be more successful? Where am I in your way? What help can I provide you? So continuing to ask them what they want and need. And we need to remember one more thing about that is that if you start asking your new employees those questions, they may have never heard those questions before. They may have never been asked before. So be patient. Give them time. Let them know that you really do want to know their aspirations. You really do want to know what their expectations are.
Right. So it goes both ways. So
It goes both ways.
we have to find out their expectations and also communicate clearly our own expectations if we are in a leadership position.
100%. I agree with you. Yep.
Mhm. And how would you help these two new members to integrate into the team? How would you build relationships with the other team members?
Yeah. I'll tell you what we do on our team and what I've been advising other leaders at all levels to do for a long time. And first, context. My team, there are currently 12 members of my team who are spread across the United States. There are more that live closer to me than don't, but we're spread out. Okay. There's only two of them that I see on a regular basis down the hall. So that's the context. So, and one of those people, unfortunately, is going to be leaving. And so we'll be bringing a new team member on soon. And one of the things that will be an expectation of them in the first 2 weeks they're here is this. I want you to have, in our case, a Zoom call with every other member of the team. So with like 10 or 12 other people. And the goal of this call or this conversation is not about work. In other words, if I want people to build relationships and be able to collaborate and communicate more effectively, they have to, at some level, get to know each other. And so I make it an opening part of the expectations that you're going to have this 20 to 30-minute conversation with every other person on the team. And it is one of the things that I check on the most of any of the other things as a part of their getting started. So what does this do? This gives them the chance to get to know people that they might not otherwise. It reinforces to the rest of the team that these relationships matter. It shows the new person that relationships matter here, that our ability to collaborate is important here. And it also models it for me. Like I can't just say, hey, relationships matter here, but we're investing time. So I'm investing, think about it. If two people spend 30 minutes, that's an hour. So I'm investing 12 hours of our company's time, our most valuable resource, on that person getting to know the other members of the team, which accelerates our success on every other metric.
Mhm. And if they have to collaborate with other team members in their first weeks or in the first period in the company, do you participate in their collaboration? Do you assist their communication? Do
It
you step
depends.
in if it's needed?
Well, certainly I might step in if it's needed. I don't think that that happens all that often. So let me go back and say that those 20 to 30-minute conversations are about non-work. Many of those people, they will have direct working, I mean, like specific. So a person might have a much longer or a series of conversations with someone who's helping teach them job
Yes.
roles, work processes, etc. I'm talking about this sits on top of the rest of that, right? So some of those job specific kinds of conversations for some of those new people, I might be in a meeting at first as a part of an opening introduction. And then typically what I will do is I would leave. If there's something I can do to set context and clarity with both parties, I might be there, but I won't likely stay unless there's some issue or problem. So hopefully, if we
Mhm.
can set clear and have enough clarity about it, then my role doesn't need to be significant. But I need to be, to your point, if things go sideways, I need to be ready and willing to coach one or both parties as necessary.
Yes, I was asking this because you don't really know that person, that new people, because yes, you know them from the hiring process, but you don't know how they work with other people, how they interact, and if there are potential issues. And
Yeah.
that's why I ask this question.
Well, I typically, and it again, it does depend a little bit on the exact situation, but I would typically be asking for feedback from the other party, right? So we got the new
Mm-hmm.
person and we got the experienced person, and I might be asking, checking in with the other team members. How is it going? How is
Mm-hmm.
the interaction happening? Um, you know, are you off to a good start? Is there anything I can do to help? So I think that I have a we as leaders have a responsibility to make sure, I think, which is your point, that things are progressing. And so we might very well want to do some check-ins, but for me, mostly those aren't happening with me as a part of a meeting, but I'm just checking in to see how
Yes.
it's working. And I'm asking both parties that. So if there's any gap or any concern or I see a red flag, then based on what that red flag tells me, I might need to take some other action.
Right. So, you get to you work with these people for some time, and you want to engage them more in their work. How would you know how to do this? What motivates those people?
Well, number one, I'm going to use my observation. Number two is that it's a part of our ongoing expectations of team members that they take ownership, that they are engaged. And yet I know that ultimately they make that decision whether they're going to be engaged, whether this is they're feeling connected to this work, to our customers, and to their teammates, right? So it's pretty clear in our job expectations is that's where I want you to get to. So that means if it's a clear expectation, I can coach to it along the way, right? How people are progressing is a part of how I'm going to coach people. And if people aren't really engaging or are holding back in some ways, then I'm going to try to understand why that might be, right? It doesn't happen often, but it could mean that maybe it's just not the right fit. Doesn't mean they're doing something wrong, doesn't necessarily mean we're doing something wrong, but maybe it's just not the right fit. And so I'd rather be continuing to think about that and working on that rather than having someone here a really long time and never having them feel engaged.
So you will go back to the hiring process and think what was wrong in that.
Well, yeah, it might lead us to think about asking different questions during the interviewing or hiring
Yes.
process. But sometimes it's just individuals, right? Human beings are wonderful and amazing, and all of us are unique, right? So I do want to know, and I try to find this out in the interview process, like what is it that you love the most about the jobs you love the most? Like, what are the things that get you excited about working? Like, I'm going to give you a paycheck. Like, if we don't give people paychecks, they're going to quit coming to work, right? But what is it beyond that that gets them excited um, and wanting to be engaged? So I want to know that up front because if I don't feel like we can provide that, then they may not be the right fit up front. But those are the kinds of questions I'm going to continue to ask my team members. Like, what's working, what's not, what do you need that you're not getting? How can I help you get those things? That should be and hopefully hopefully my team would say that that's an ongoing part of our conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go further and
Okay.
let's see a situation in which a team has poor performance. And I want to ask you, what do you think is the leader's part in this situation? What can he or she do in this kind of
Yep.
situation?
Number one. So if you've already said there's a performance problem. So number one, that means that there's a gap between what the expectation is and what they're delivering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the gap is in their performance, behavior, or results. So performance problem to me is performance, behavior, results, all three of those things together, or any one of those things. So if there's a problem, that means there's a gap. If there's a gap, coaching is needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, the first part of coaching is does the other person understand or see or know the gap? We said this at the start. A lot of times leaders aren't very good at setting expectations. There are lots of times when people think they're doing their job, but you think there's a gap. We've got to make sure they know there's a gap too, right? So job one is, do they see the gap? Do they see the performance problem? Do they see the behavior problem? Do they see the results issue? Because until they see it and acknowledge it too, you've got very little chance of success. They feel like they're doing just fine, right? So we've got to get clarity and awareness uh, of the gap, and then we've got to help them see why that gap matters. If this is the gap, if this is the performance problem, why is it a problem? And what will get better if we change it? So that's, you used the word motivation earlier. The other person has to have an internal motivation to say this, there is change required and changing it matters. Right. So those are the first two things. The big picture answer is if there's a performance problem as a leader and coach, I have a responsibility to address that with that person. Those are the first two things that I want to do once I do that. And I can do that in a way, and I need to do that in a way that is specific and clear to the other person so they have the best chance of success moving forward.
And would you investigate if they know how to fill out that gap, how if they know how to do their jobs?
Yeah, to me, that's part of that coaching conversation, right? So here's the gap. Well,
Mm-hmm.
and if they say, well, I didn't know that, or I don't know how to do it that way, well, then, okay. So maybe what we need to do is there's some training or some education that needs to happen. So that's part of that initial conversation is, so why is the gap there? Are they not aware of it? Do they think they're doing it right? Do they not have the skill or experience or knowledge to do it differently? If that's the case, pretty straightforward. I can give them that um, advice, that counsel, that training, whatever it might be, whether it's me or someone else on the team, right? And so 100%. The other thing I'll say about performance gaps is it's very rare that they will fix themselves.
All
In
right.
other words, if we don't say anything, what we're basically telling them is, without saying
It's
anything,
okay.
is the way they're doing it is okay. Exactly.
All
So
right.
turning a blind eye, crossing our fingers and hoping it gets better, not
Mm-hmm.
likely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what do you
But
say
it doesn't
about
have to be adversarial. It doesn't have to be an adversarial conversation. It's just a chance for us to get clearer about what performance
mhm.
is expected and required, and then helping them get there.
I saw some leaders that let the employee to go with their poor performance and they don't intervene in any way. And I think it's such a shame because maybe, as you say, that employee doesn't know that they do a poor job or that they don't meet the expectations. And
And here's what happens: the leader, they keep having poor performance. The other person, they have poor performance, and then what does the leader do? They blame the other person. Well, wait a
right,
minute. You need to own this too, because if they continue to do something the wrong way or a less than great way, then we're letting them know that that way is okay. And
right.
why would anyone change it if they're not getting any feedback to the contrary?
Yes, I think
That's the problem. We blame them when we
yes.
need to look in the mirror as the leader.
It's a difference between a small company where the leadership people are there and big companies where team leaders are also employees and the top management is very far away. And sometimes these team leaders are not so engaged and they don't care so much about their team members' performance. And I think that this is one factor that lead to these kinds of situations.
I don't think it's always with big companies. It might be a little more likely that that's the case. Um, Unfortunately, I've seen leaders at all levels and all sizes of companies that don't, they see that performance problem conversation as a difficult conversation.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, the longer you wait, the more difficult it will be for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's why I said a minute ago, it doesn't, I always or often urge leaders, team leaders, or more senior leaders, you don't need to view this as adversarial. You need to view this as conversational. I believe that 95% of people want to do good work 95% of the time. Good work is defined by the expectation. If you're not, if I don't, if no one's telling me that I'm doing something wrong when I'm doing these podcast interviews like we're having now, and I don't know it, then I assume I'm doing fine. And so
You're
I don't
doing
have the need to
fine, by the way.
change. But right. But my point is, if I don't know, then I'm assuming that what I'm doing is probably okay.
Yes, yes, I understand. So
Well,
I
thank
want
you for
to
that feedback.
thank you for being a guest and giving sharing your knowledge with us. So I want to ask you something else, and this is related to change and flexibility to change. So I see a lot on social media about creating processes and structures that help a business run independently. So it doesn't depends on its people, and I think that this can lead to some issues because. Although this approach has its advantages, it may make people feel replaceable and also make the company more rigid in the face of external changes and challenges.
I think the
How do
second
you
point
see
of
this situation?
Yeah, I think the second part of what you said is really important. Like many of us, especially people that well have been around as long as I have, that have the color of hair that I have, which is gray, everybody. Um, I grew up in a time where process improvement was an important skill, that building clearer processes help us to be more productive and more successful, and yes, allow us, if we're growing and adding people, or if someone leaves, like that, processes are valuable, and I'm not suggesting they're not. And back to our and conversation, if we over rely on them, we will become rigid, and we will become set in a way. This is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. And that is our process. And guess what? That process at one time might have been fantastic. But as we said earlier, times are changing, situations are changing, context is changing. That process delivered a great outcome, but maybe the outcome we need now is different, or at least a little different than it was before. And so my and here is that, do the tools of process building and process improvement matter? Yes. And they're not the only thing we need to be focused on, because in a world that's complex and more interconnected and less of an ordered system, processes alone won't get us where we want to go. We can, in other words, we can over rely on them, which I think was your
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
initial point.
Yes, I think that sometimes people can be controlled by processes and forget that they control the processes and they can change them.
Yeah. Or they become so locked into them that they don't even see that they need to be changed. Right.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
But about the human part, because some people may feel that they are replaceable, that if everything is written down and everyone can read that thing, they can learn how to do those things, and I'm not available for the company. And
I think that's
I can't contribute. I can't come with my ideas, with my suggestions. So sometimes it's hard to even discuss about this, and maybe I will not even speak because it's too hard. There are too many steps through which I have to go through, change the process, and I will just don't do it.
the biggest challenge with all of those concerns are not the processes themselves, but the folks who are leading. So
Mhm.
if we as leaders really do want our folks to be engaged, then what does engagement look like? It looks like saying, hey, I think we could improve this process. It means saying, hey, maybe we have too many steps here. It relates to uh, making people helping people see that we really want their input to
Mhm.
either improve the process, change the process, or remove the process. In other words, what processes enable us to do done well is to make the simple work simple so we then have time to do the higher order thinking. Like that's what everyone's saying about AI. We can't just take the AI result, plug it in, and go. We then have, as humans, we have the ability to consider, right? And and think about those results to say, how will those help us? How will they make a difference for us? Do all of those results make sense for us? And so I think what we as leaders need to do is help our people see that processes can allow us all to sit on top of that to make things better, to make things more meaningful, rather than the work is the process. But the process allows us to have some time and perspective then to help make things better.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's what we want our folks to do, right? We don't just want them to follow the process. If our expectations of them is to simply follow the process, well, then it's pretty easy for them to think, well, then I'm expendable, right? We have to help them see their job as more than just that. And when we see it as more than that, and we help them see it as more than that, then some of those concerns will be less concerning.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it is true. We need processes because without them, we reinvent the wheel again and again. And
Yes,
but if there are too many, they can block us and they can make us some executants and not really be there and
I agree.
get our best in those jobs. Yes.
I agree.
So now let's go to your to your latest book. So you published this year a book,
Mhm.
Flexible Leadership: Navigate
Mhm.
Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence.
Yep.
It's an interesting title and it's an interesting topic. Could you tell us a little bit more about this book and what are some strategies that leaders can use to navigate uncertainty?
We've certainly talked about some of them already, right? We talked about
Yes.
earlier about the idea of thinking about more things from a perspective of both and rather than either or. And that's a critical idea. Uh, we think of the flexible leadership approach as having three parts. First is intention. And we have talked about this. The intention and willingness and recognition that how we lead might need to change, or how I might lead in a certain situation might need to be different than my natural instinct or habit. So, intention. And the second piece is the context of the situation. And again, I've hinted at this several times throughout our conversation as well. What does the situation actually look like? It may not be as clear and straightforward as we've thought about it in the past. The best practice might not even be helping us anymore, kind of related to our process conversation, and the world is more complex. So we need to have, and in the book, we talk about a framework to help us see context differently. So my intention is to be willing to flex based on the situation and what does the situation tell me about what I need to do, right? You framed that up when we had the conversation about the new salesperson and the new IT person. Who they are, what their roles are, might lead me to lead them, coach them, communicate with them each differently, and neither of those might be the way I most like to do it, but they're going to work best for them. So intention plus context plus flexors. So in the book, we identify 19 of these flexors, and I'll just pick one, right? Because all of actually, I've given you the idea of them already when I said that there are two ends, right? There are results and relationships, and that if we go too far to either end, we probably will have problems. right? And that we as leaders need to be taking both results and relationships into account as we lead. And so that would be an example of a flexor, and being willing to shift between those two tension points across that spectrum, regardless of our personal preference, natural natural ability or habit. And so let's just take one more. When we think about feedback, we think about, well, there's positive feedback and there's corrective feedback. And most of us probably realize that, well, we probably ought to be giving some of each. Which should I be giving in a given situation? Well, I might be a person that really likes to give positive feedback, but right now there's a performance problem. There's an issue. And so right now, even though I might prefer more positive, right now what I need to do is give them clear and specific correction so that that error doesn't become a new habit, right? We've talked about that at some length. But there are other times when maybe so let's say that I watch someone give a presentation and they're beating themselves up. They feel like they did so poorly. And maybe they've identified 3 or 4 things they know they need to work on. Maybe what they need right now, and you might agree with all those things, by the way, and you can acknowledge that. But maybe what they need right now is to hear the 2 things that they did exceptionally well while they were making the other mistakes. Both can be true, right? I could have not been very well prepared and I could stumbled over my words a lot. And yet my message could have gotten through, right? So both things can be true. Could I have done better? Yes, there are some ways I could have done better. And what went well also. And so that's an example of a flexor. And which direction I need to lean depends on the situation with the person or with the team in that moment.
Mm-hmm. You are in a special situation because you give feedback to trainers, people who train others. And this is very, you have to be above them in certain ways.
Hopefully.
Yes. So, Kevin, can you tell us more about your business and how can people reach out to you if they need help with leadership or other services that you offer?
Yeah, we are. Thank you for that chance to do that. So we are in the business of helping leaders make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. That's the business that we're in, is to help leaders come closer to being the leaders they were born to be, and therefore making a bigger positive difference in the world. And so there's lots of ways we do that. We've mentioned some. We do coaching, we do training, we do consulting. I write books. I have a podcast. I come on other people's, like lots of ways that shows up. So if the messages that I've shared today resonate with you, I do speaking. I mean, I could keep going down the list, right? If the way in which I'm communicating, if the ideas that I'm sharing are useful to you, you certainly might find value in following me or connecting with me on LinkedIn. If you're a person that's on LinkedIn, you can find me there, and I'd be happy to be connected with you. Just tell me how you found me. I'd love to know that. You can certainly go to our website where you'll find all about our services and products, and that's at kevineikenberry.com, KevinEikenB as in boy, ERRY.com. And if you want to learn more about the Flexible Leadership book, just go kevineikenberry.com/flexible. And then, if I may, one more thing, that if you've listened to us for this time and you found it useful, I would like to give you a gift. And if you go to kevineikenberry.com/gift, GIFT, there's a gift there for you. I recorded a masterclass a couple of years ago that we sell every day about building our confidence and the confidence of others, an important skill for us to have as leaders. And I want to give that to you for being with us. Just go to kevineikenberry.com/gift.
Thank you for these details, Kevin, and for this gift. And I will put the links to your social media in the show notes. And thank you very much for being so generous with your answers and giving so much from your experience.
Well, it was my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for asking great questions. And for all of you listening, I would just say keep following Danella, keep listening to her podcast. But most importantly, make sure that you take some action on what you learn. Like just learning and say, oh, that's good, isn't enough. Take action on something and to help you be a more effective leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you found value in this podcast, subscribe to stay updated. I'm grateful for your support and hope to continue providing content that helps you grow. See you in the next episode.